Welcome to the Honest Designers Show, your transparent look into life as a modern designer. My name's Tom Ross and I'm the founder at designcuts.com, and this week I'm joined by American retro design expert Dustin Lee and the incredibly talented South African illustrator Lisa Glams. In this week's episode, we chat about sticking with your creative endeavors. Consistency is so important to improving as a designer, but often life and our own mindset can get in the way. Today, we dig into the best ways to ensure that you keep going and practice your skills on a consistent basis. Let's get into the show. So in today's episode, we are looking at sticking with it, as in how do you persevere with whatever creative skill you're looking at. And I know last week we talked about, Dustin, your new hobby, skill, creative talent that you're exploring with your illustration.
Yes.
So in fact, should we kick things off? We've just been talking about this off the call. Should we kick off with a big plug for our friend Dustin?
Yes, let's do it.
Oh, it's worth mentioning, actually, Ian is not here with us this week. He's gallivanting, as he often does.
What's gallivanting?
I feel like that's a very British term, actually.
It's so British, yeah.
It's when he rides his noble steed off into the distance.
That's exactly the vision I had. Yeah.
So yeah, Dustin has started illustrating, and last week I think we actually were giving you a hard time saying you need to be accountable, you need to make this public, this is a great thing, and we were saying you should share it with the world, right, and start an Instagram.
Yes.
And so you have now done this.
I have done it. Yeah.
The Instagram is what's the handle, Dustin?
It is Hey Dustin Lee on Instagram, and every day, knock on wood, I'm publishing a new drawing with no expectation and no perfectionism syndrome. I'm just making something and putting it up, and it's been amazing.
Exciting.
It's been so surprisingly therapeutic. I thought it would be really stressful, but it's been really just like this fun alternative. There's no point to it. I'm not trying to make money from it or get clients or be famous for it. And if something happens from it, whatever that would be, then cool. If not, then I'll just be drawing.
I love that.
Me too.
And
so exciting.
It's just a personal project. It's just for fun. Yeah, that's great. It's what it's all about. And Lisa and I have been inflating your ego, right? Before we jumped on this call. Because
artificially, probably.
But well deserved. Well deserved. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's really, really good. Like, it's great regardless. I love it in general. But the fact you're just starting this kind of blows my mind.
Well, I'm doing, like I said, see, one of the huge advantages of doing something purely because you're enjoying doing it or because you want to do it is I don't have to worry so much about just anything really. So for instance, like I really like Mikey Burton, and then I'm going to say her name wrong, Gemma Correll.
Gemma, yeah.
And I'll just see people I like and be like, oh, I'm going to try doing something that looks kind of like that. But then I'm not worried. Oh no, it looks too much like that because I'm just drawing for fun. I'm not trying to pass it off for anything or use it in a portfolio. And I can also do fun things. Like the other day, my family was sick and I made a popsicle, and I was thinking of NyQuil and popsicles because I miss summer. So I made a NyQuil pop, which actually sounds amazing because it would soothe your throat and be cold, and then you would pass out from the NyQuil as you slowly ate it. It might be dangerous, but anyways.
I think you're onto a winner.
Yeah.
I think the FDA would never pass it.
But yeah, the whole thing is just, it's great to hear your positivity with it, to be honest, because I know with so many projects we've discussed, there has been a lot of stress associated, and yeah, just you sound like a kid.
Yeah, I feel like a kid doing it. And you know what's funny is we get on the show and give a lot of advice, and doing something brand new that I've never done, I am re-experiencing the fears that people write about when they ask questions and things like that. So when I first started, I locked it so people wouldn't see it. And then
I remember that. Yeah, I tried following you and I was like, what is this?
yeah. And then like I let Ian in and I was like, Ian, got any feedback? He's like, dude, make that public.
Yeah.
So I made it public, but it's scary kind of. But yeah, so it's been helping me to understand again the beginner's mind of the fear of doing things.
And I love that because it's a live case study.
It is.
And I always hate these shows where people hypothesize based on stuff they've never done and will never do. And it's just vague assumptions. So the fact you're actually going through this.
Yeah, you're a walking petri dish. It's brilliant.
I
we often think of you like that.
Yeah, it's very good.
Doesn't that sound like a great Instagram handle or a great band name? The Walking Petri Dish?
Yeah.
It's like The Walking Dead, just slightly less terrifying.
but you actually spot on with how you say you kind of trying to copy those that you admire, but you don't have any end goals, and that's exactly actually how you should start. So you don't put pressure on yourself. You don't, I've got to find my style. If you stick to that, it'll be far easier and less stressful. Because you're not really hoping to get anywhere, really.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so counterintuitive, but you're right. When you are not trying to get anywhere, all of a sudden your mind just becomes very open to trying things.
Very, yeah.
Exactly. Which counterintuitively can maybe help you get somewhere.
It does. It's so weird. It is true.
So yeah, final kind of early plug. Go and check out Hey Dustin Lee on Instagram and give Dustin a follow. Leave some comments. It would be great. And I actually love the impact this kind of thing has when you're very early in a project like this. Like when you have 4 followers and you get one more and you increased your followership by 25%.
Yeah. It's exciting.
It's really exciting to see those initial faces. So.
When Lisa followed me and then liked 4 of my things, I felt really important. It's like, wow. I was like, wow, this great illustrator is following me and just liked 4 of my things.
Of course.
So yeah, do follow me and give me your feedback. I know there's a lot of talented illustrators that listen. So follow me and give me some feedback to help me or encouragement, because it is hard to do something new.
Of course.
And then the problem is that, so everyone's been asking, why are you drawing? Why are you drawing this stuff? Like I was drawing socks yesterday and I'm visiting family because it's holidays in the United States for Thanksgiving. So everyone's asking, why are you drawing stuff? So I keep telling them, I'm going to draw every day for a year. That's my plan. I'm going to put something up every day, whether it's good or bad. And they're like, what day are you on? And I was like, 7. And they started laughing. And I was like, well, I can't do anything about that. Like, time goes as time goes. Like it happens to be day 7. But now I'm deathly afraid I'm going to stop. So
that leads into today, I guess.
What?
That leads into today very well.
Exactly. So my problem is I need to stick with it so I don't look like what would you call it? I don't know. So I don't have everyone giving me a hard time when I stop on day 21 or something.
Yeah, you don't want to look flaky. Okay, so let's start with some obvious things. I think first of all, fun. Having fun is so vital to sticking with it because you're not doing it for the wrong reasons. You're doing it because of genuine enjoyment.
Yeah.
True. I think another thing to consider is, why do you want to stick with it?
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you're doing it because it's fun and then it stops being fun, maybe you shouldn't stick with it. If you start hating it,
right,
then maybe you should try something else. So I think a lot of people try and impose this persistence and consistency because they've heard that's a good way to be. And maybe it's actually counterintuitive.
Except I think if your goal is to become better at the particular skill, then you are going to find days where you either don't want to do it or it's not really working out and you're getting frustrated, so it's not becoming fun anymore on that particular day, or you're having a bad week doing it. You might need to go through that if your goal is to actually get better at that particular skill, because I think you are going to have down days. You are going to have days where it's not quite working out or you're getting frustrated or
completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely agree. And it's the same, like whether it's illustrating or going to the gym or playing the piano, you will absolutely get those days. So if your goal, as you say, is to get better, then you got to stick through it. But if your goal is not to particularly get better, your goal is simply to have fun, well, then pick up a pen whenever you feel like it, when the mood strikes, and have fun drawing. And I don't think you need this kind of ruthless consistency. So something we kind of touched on before this call actually was how your results have to map to your effort and your expectations, right? You have to map to the effort you're willing to put in.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're not putting in any consistency and you're not really getting better, then fine. But if you're not really putting in any consistency and you're really mad and you're like, why on earth haven't I improved at this? Like there's obviously a gap there in your reasoning.
Yeah.
And it sounds very obvious, but I see this all the time. And this has been like a real personal revelation for me, because I think before I'd always give myself a hard time about this kind of thing because my expectations were wildly unrealistic. And now I'm kind of more feet on the ground. I think, like, I've got my own Instagram, Tom Ross Media, little plug. And I was posting these business tips and stuff. And recently life has been so busy and work's been so busy, I haven't done as many of them. So guess what? It hasn't really grown and the engagement's dropped off. But I'm not beating myself up about that. If anything, it's refreshing to know that things pan out that way, because they should. That makes logical sense. If I did nothing and suddenly it took off like crazy, that would be confusing. That would be jarring. But pretty much 100% of the time, you will see it map out as it should. The more you put in, the more you get out.
Right. Yeah, and your goal can even be, if your goal can change along the way. If it changes from, I don't necessarily want to learn how to do the drawing thing anymore, but I do want to know what it feels like to commit to something.
Right.
And then maybe your goal could be, I've got to finish this because I said it's going to be a year and I want it to be a year, So it can change.
Well, and I've noticed, even just being a week into it, I've noticed as I do it, my brain starts to adjust to why I want to do it. So I don't want to be a master illustrator. I just have no interest in being able to do hyper realistic drawings or things like that. But I do, like, as I've been drawing, I'm like, I have an interest in being able to, in particular, I feel like something that a lot of artists struggle with is having something interesting to say that's worth coming back to look at. Not amazing drawings where you're like, wow, that drawing's amazing, but having some sort of message or concept that pulls you back. I'm like, I want to build it to say something where when people look at it, they're like, oh, that's interesting, or I'm glad I looked at that because that made me think of things differently. Yeah. Almost like really good little bits of advice or things like that, or insights put into a childlike drawing.
Yeah. I mean, that's like giving a voice to what's inside of you. I mean, that's a lot of artists want that. As you said, they really struggle with it. And if your goal is to kind of be more of a commentary based approach to illustrating, that's awesome. And that is also a muscle that needs to be practiced. So yeah, definitely, that's a cool goal.
Right. Yeah, and two, like, it's interesting to think about, well, like, where does these things lead you? So for instance, I was thinking about a lot of illustrators say, oh, how do I make money from this? And they can't find how they'll do that. And then, so I thought about one person. I thought about the oatmeal. And I thought, this guy has built an empire selling his Exploding Kittens cards. If you're not familiar with that, he has his Exploding Kittens cards and he has books. And I thought, well, it's because, like, he's gone very drastically in one direction. And that's helped him because it's just so over the top and so he's so just, I'm saying what I'm going to say. And it just I don't know, it's interesting. It just makes you start, every day as you do it, you think, how can I be myself, or how can I not edit myself?
I know, that's the hardest job.
I think that's the key, is bearing all. And it's the same with podcasting, I guess, in our case. Like, we're not trying to hide behind a facade or anything, or any kind of content or creativity or putting yourself out there. Not many people are willing to do it. And so when you truly wear your heart on your sleeve in your work, I think that does stand out and people gravitate to that authenticity.
Yeah, definitely.
So is one way to think about how to stick with things, alleviating risks and stresses. So if you kind of proactively try and think what would put me off sticking with this thing, and then try and mitigate those
That's true.
aspects
Mhm.
rather. So
Yep.
like for you guys, I mean both you guys, what tends to put you off of doing stuff?
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking if I compare, because Dustin, if we obviously chatting about your sort of fun stuff that you're doing at the moment, but if I just look at the things that I'm trying to stick to, which is some kind of a weekly schedule, or kind of, you know, plan my days or plan my week so I can actually get the stuff done that I need to get done, and I never seem to be able to stick to it.
Mhm.
I find the hardest is, I think it's probably the overwhelm. I still, even though I advise this to people, I don't do it myself. I don't, for some reason, I don't have this ability in my mind to break it down to small projects, you know, or small sort of tasks that don't seem so overwhelming. I can't do it. I keep just seeing this bigger picture, and because of that, I want to bury my head in the sand and never come out. I don't know.
And doesn't it feel like no matter how much you try to, like, I feel like I learn every time I do a project. I'm like, that took 5 times as long as I thought. Lesson learned. Next
Yeah.
time I'll know that it takes way longer. Let's not do that again.
Exactly.
5 years into my business, I'll still tell Suzanne, who I work with, I'll be like, I think we can get this done in 3 days. 3 weeks later, it's just about wrapped up. And I'm like, why do I not learn my own lesson? It's like I keep returning to my insane,
goals or
overambitious.
deadlines. Yes. So maybe that's the problem. Is half the problem is we have our expectations are just way out of, like, you know, reality. It's just probably not real. I don't know.
Okay, so the fix would be trying to readjust your expectations.
How?
Could it
How?
well could it maybe, instead of being time, could it maybe be in the case of learning a new skill or sticking with something like that, it could be how good you think you're going to get. So you're putting undue pressure if you think, okay, in 6 weeks I should be amazing, or you set some unrealistic goal like that. So it's perhaps looking at case studies where you have to reevaluate and think, okay, well, every person I admire in this field, it took them 15 years.
Yeah.
True.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So I can say for myself in different things that for my own assessment of myself, I've succeeded at. That's been the case. So like Retro Supply, when I started it, I had a child on the way, so I didn't have expectations of making a lot of money. I was just trying to make a little bit, and I was doing just what I could and putting it out once a week, no matter what, right? Kind of like I am now. Like I was just like, this is going out. I don't know if this is good. I don't know if people will make fun of me. I'm just putting it out. And sure enough, that continued on. Or when I started running a couple years ago, and I used to run consistently for like 2 years. I remember when I started, I said, you're going this far. You run as much as you can. It doesn't matter if you run, walk, crawl, lay down on a skateboard and, lizard crawl your way through this. You will do this. And that's what I did. That was the only expectation. And because of that, when I couldn't run, I would walk it. And eventually I could run the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think anytime that you're able to lower the expectation where you can succeed always, because the only way you don't succeed is if you just decide to stop, it makes it so much easier than if you say, I must hit this complex thing.
Yeah.
You know?
I saw a great YouTube channel at the weekend. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's called How to Learn Anything Quickly.
No, I haven't
sounds
seen
cool.
that.
It's a Scottish guy, and he gets viewer suggestions on skills he should learn next week or whatever. And it's everything from riding a unicycle to throwing an axe to doing a Rubik's Cube really quickly.
Wow.
Doing like muscle ups. You know what they are?
No.
Where you do a chin up and then kind of into a dip. So you have to like pull yourself up to your chin and then keep going so your arms.
I do CrossFit, and that sounds torturous.
Yeah, so it's all like really, really like difficult stuff. And the way he does it is he sets a very simple, very concrete goal where it was like, I will do a wheelie on a bicycle for 50 meters. and it will be very concrete stuff like that. So it won't be overly complex. It won't be vague. It's like, I will do this and I won't stop until I get there. And then in the videos, he basically films it and he edits it really well, but it will show like him getting frustrated and like failing. But then he gets slowly better. And he normally does them within a space of like a few hours. It'll be like 6-7 hours of continuous practice broken down into, you know, sections each day over a couple of weeks or whatever. And it's really fascinating and kind of addictive to watch him just get better and better and better. And when he finally nails it, he's just going crazy, like celebrating. And
That's cool.
I kind of see it the same way. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to be a great illustrator, that's too vague. But if you're like, I will post an illustration every day for 100 days,
Right.
or something like that.
Yeah, that's a specific goal.
It's very concrete. Yeah, it's very specific.
Actually,
Right.
that's brilliant advice, Tom, because I'm just thinking, I mean, if I think about my schedules and you know, writing these forever lists and never sticking to them, maybe I've been, you know, looking at the end result of this very well organized person that works from lists and gets everything done. You know, maybe that's just too far in the future. Maybe I need to think of, you know, this week, can I stick to the plan? You know?
Yeah, so whatever it is, if it's like, oh, draw a new character, it's like, I will draw a new character every morning for a week.
Yeah.
It's like super concrete, not ambiguous. And it actually tricks your brain. And I do this with my own to-do list, because I used to do really, really bad to-do lists where it would be like, grow the business more as a to-do list item. So just that kind of thing. Whereas if you're like,
vague.
Send this email out at this time or something, or
I've done
write
that
this
before.
post.
Make more money.
Yeah.
Don't forget to make more money this time.
I'd love to see that list. Oh, goodness.
But yeah, I think that can be really useful when trying to stick to something, just setting that concrete goal, because not only are you more likely to stick to it, but you have a solid point where you can celebrate. Because I think what makes me fall off the wagon is if there's no solid end point, I feel like it could go on forever.
Yeah, man.
Whereas if you say, I'm going to do this for 100 days, at the end of the 100 days, you should be popping champagne. You should be having a party. Like,
that's
you know,
so
it
true.
should be a big deal where you're like, I did it. I stuck to it. And you'll feel so good and release all those positive endorphins. You'll be more likely to repeat the process.
Even so, like, I was thinking at first when you said that with like Retro Supply, I was like, well, if I was to be like, when Retro Supply hits 5 years and it's done and I've like can celebrate. But I was like, no, that doesn't work. But I hear what you're saying. Like, you mean like more the smaller, the micro parts of it. Like, I'm going to make a product and it's going to do this. And then when you finish it after the 2-week time or whatever you did, you need to celebrate it and be like, that's a closed chapter. It's worth celebrating. And it gives you that positive vibes to continue.
Yeah, because otherwise you just go headlong into the next thing.
Yeah, totally.
And you never take the time to pat yourself on the back and go, oh, that's amazing.
No.
I got that done, because we don't have bosses standing over us saying, great job, you finished that.
Yeah. And when do we get our bonus check?
Right. I heard, I think his name is Scott Adams, who created Dilbert the comic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a philosophy on things, and he said the way he believes the way to succeed is to work in processes, not goals. So he's like, if you're doing a diet, you have a process, and the process might be, I don't eat X, like, or I drink 8 glasses of water a day. I walk 30 minutes a day, and it's a process. And every day I do that process. And as a result of the process, I lose weight, as opposed to saying by November 30th, I'll lose 10 pounds.
Yeah.
And
so
so
how do I get there?
Yeah. And so like, as I'm drawing, I've been kind of thinking about that, because he was like, every point doesn't matter. If you have a bad day, it doesn't matter. It's the general average smear, for lack of a better word, of how things look over time that matters.
Yeah.
So the one point could be, you know, sometimes you're going to have a point that's way up there that's a huge win. Sometimes you're going to have a point that's way down there that's just, you know, horrible. But
That's so true.
if you continuously do it, you should have a general trend that paints a positive picture, you know?
Oh, quite literally in your case.
Yeah, no pun intended.
Yeah.
But I thought that was an interesting way to look at it that he had, that Scott Adams.
it is.
Yeah, that is.
think his book is called How to Fail at Just About Everything, and he talks about it.
Yeah, so it's basically not torturing yourself for those days that just don't work out.
Right. It's all part of the process. That's the whole,
Yeah.
You won if you got through the bad day and put out something bad.
Yeah.
So what is your goal
My goal?
right now? Yeah.
I think without thinking about it, my goal just became probably from Ian being consistent. I was like, I'm going to do this for a year. Maybe that's too long and maybe it should be shorter, but I think that was my goal, was just something should be posted every day, day 1, day 2, day 3. Fancy or not fancy, good or bad, put in some effort every day to do a drawing.
Nice.
Maybe that's too long. I don't know. Do you guys think? Is a year too long?
I think you should put the number with each post if you haven't done.
I have been doing that.
You have? Okay, great. Because then you're going to be edging closer. And once you're like 257 days in, you'll be less likely to give up because you're like, oh, I made it so far.
Yeah.
But do you think I should do like 100 days instead? Like, is a year too long? I'll be a different person in a year.
Yeah, that's true. Although, after a certain time, it becomes such a habit. It'll be part of your daily routine, like brushing your teeth. So I think whether you do it for 100 or a year, I'm not sure if that's really a big difference. I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds like a big difference, but I think once you've reached the 100-day mark, you may as well go all the way. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like once you reach a year mark, you might just, like, part of me thought, what if, like, I end up doing this for the rest of my life, for better or worse? Because after a year, you're just I don't know what to do. Every day when I wake up, I just automatically draw these bad drawings on paper. It becomes this crazy obsession. So I was curious, though. I wanted to ask both of you this. So I know Lisa because I've stalked you.
Ah.
I never told you that, but I've stalked you quite a bit.
Okay.
Actually, not quite a bit. Don't worry. And I look back at your products from the beginning.
Yes. How embarrassing.
Well, no.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know.
You can be honest.
I think we all have some embarrassing things when we start things. Just look at my Instagram. I just started. But when you started, it was more like you were, to me, it felt like you were randomly picking at things. Like you kept trying different things. It was not your style you have today. It was,
no.
I don't even know. I'm making examples here, but maybe you'd do a badge kit or you'd see this thing was popular and you'd try it. And
it's exactly what I did.
It felt like you were blindly reaching for things. And then like eventually like you hit something kind of in your style, then you hit something a little more in your style. Yep. And then like eventually it just became consistently. And I did the same thing. And eventually it just becomes consistently. It's Lisa Glanzer. Consistently for me, it's Retro Supply. And Tom, for you too, I know you had a point when you were starting where, I mean, there was a day when you didn't have any partners. You had to wake up one day and that was the case.
Mm-hmm.
So how, when you have no traction, do you stick to it and continue going? Because I know we've all had that. Like, why did you stick to it, Lisa? You had no reason to believe it would continue on.
Actually,
for both of
I
you.
did. I had several reasons. The ones that I can think of straight off is it was like a whole new world for me. So it was so exciting and so wonderful to experiment and try things. And, like I think we spoke about this last time, that honeymoon phase where you're just starting out something new and it's just so awesome. So that just keeps you going because it's just, you're discovering new things you about yourself, about the industry, about everything. And then the other thing was I was so desperate to change my working environment. Eventually I wanted to illustrate full time. So I had this huge goal and this huge sort of fire to keep going until I figured stuff out. So those are the two main things that drove me. And I knew I'd get there because it's in my personality. I don't settle, if that makes sense.
Did you think it would succeed when you say you knew you'd get there? Or did you mean you knew you'd get there like I won't stop even if I'm rubbish and no one's buying from me 2 years from now?
I'm the kind of person, which might be extremely arrogant to assume, but I'm the kind of person that thinks no matter what happens to my circumstances, I'll figure it out and I'll make it work. So even if I was really sucky at illustration, I never got better at it, and I didn't end up doing that, something else would have come along and I would have figured it out and made it work, if that makes sense.
That's a good attitude.
Yeah.
No, but I think you've got to feel that. I don't know. You got to trust yourself enough to know that you'll get there. You'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
I like that you said no matter what, something comes out of it that will work. Because to me, that seems to be the case. It's not always what you thought, but.
Before I started selling products online, I started a jewelry business. So with my sister, which is totally different to what I'm doing now. But that led me to Etsy, and led me to Etsy, and then from there I kind of like found other stuff, So
Which is what Ian's talks about, where it's like these pathways opening up.
Yeah.
And instead of overthinking it, you just kind of go with the flow and follow whatever one feels most natural and most enjoyable.
Exactly.
Which is so freeing, I think, as a philosophy.
It is, and it's 100% true, I think, for just about everybody. I was writing a rough draft of a post yesterday talking about how, man, I started, Retro Supply wasn't called Retro Supply. I had some really dumb name for it. And I was just making these really bad logos. They weren't bad, but they weren't like my thing really. And it just slowly evolved. I mean, we were just talking about how I recently started selling physical boxes that I'm selling. It just slowly evolves into who you are.
And you follow it because that's doing well. But if it did, better and better and better, maybe you end up being the wooden box guy.
Yeah.
And that becomes your whole thing. And you never could have seen that coming.
Well, people tell you, money tells you, your gut tells you. But
your enjoyment tells you.
I was curious. I wanted to make sure I got your answer to that too, Tom, because I felt like you kind of built something out of like thin air. Such an abstract thing to me.
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, I was a designer before all this stuff as well, first and foremost. That's been my whole background. And so I think it's important maybe to touch on that, because with web design, I had to be very consistent, and that all led to finding my own style as well. And I had the same thing as you guys in the early days. I was like copying other people. I was trying to follow the trends. And it was just through sticking with it that I did land upon my own style. And I think similar to Lisa, I kept doing that and being quite prolific because I just couldn't stop because I loved it. And it was that thing. I would be halfway through a design and I physically could not walk away from the screen until it was done. I'd like get up to make a cup of tea, or like I'd need to go to the bathroom for 5 hours and wouldn't get up, or I should get some sleep or whatever. And I had to keep going with it until I was happy. And that's normally a pretty good sign. Because it's not an uphill battle to stick with it. It's just a natural thing.
Yeah. You want to.
And so kind of what I'm hearing here is, yes, you should push for consistency if you know it will lead to results or get you on the right path to the results you're after. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with not sticking with it if you pivot and move into something else. Like, I don't want this episode to be saying you have to stick with it no matter what, because maybe you do get bored with it, but it does lead you to something even greater.
Well, I guess, how do you know for sure when the right time is to stop sticking with it? Because everybody has the time when they say, forget this is stupid. Why am I wasting so much time on this? And that's, it could be argued that's the time when the people that win do stick with it.
I guess
so how do you know?
It goes back to the original thing of what your goal is. If I just take my jewelry business that I started with my sister, for example, I mean, I poured quite a lot of time and money actually into that, and I tried everything. I tried to get it off the ground in every possible way I could think of, and what it ultimately took was me sitting down with the numbers and working through, is it actually legitimately viable to make this work without pouring even more money into it, and eventually you realize it's actually, as much as you love doing it, and you, as you said, Dustin, like, shouldn't I be sticking it out because everyone says you should get through the first 3 years and all this kind of stuff. But there were too many things against me or against the business, and we had to throw in the towel. So I don't know, I guess it takes, what is your ultimate goal? Because I mean, my goal was to change my working environment, and that wasn't helping it. So I had to, I had to.
So the goal wasn't to be a successful jewelry seller as much as the goal was change my working environment to something that's positive or that I enjoy.
Yeah, which is great because the goal didn't change.
No. Yeah.
And for me, like, yes, having goals is great, but I think the passion needs to come first, because if your goal is being a success, that's where the consistency tends to fall down, when people do it for 2 weeks and then give up because they're not a success yet. Whereas if you just do it because you love it, then all that stuff can follow so much easier, and you don't start worrying about the consistency, because you
Yeah,
want to be doing it.
exactly. I mean, because I want to add to that. My goal in the beginning was, and still is, has never been about financial sort of gain necessary. Obviously, I want to make a living because we all need to eat. But my goal from the beginning and to this day actually is, how do I want to live every day? And my goal was to live an incredibly I don't know what you're thinking already, Dustin. But how
I was just thinking, I thought your goal was to build a house made only of money.
I knew you were going to come in with some kind of comment.
Oh, that's not your goal? I thought your goal was literally to make bricks of cash and then just like build a house out of it. Sorry, go ahead. I was
It's like Hansel and Gretel, just less sweet.
No, that's you're terrible.
So I'm so sorry. Continue, please. So rude.
So my goal has always been like, how do I want to feel every day when I wake up? I wanted to always feel creative and always wanted to enjoy what I did. And when I was doing my graphic design business, it became not enjoyable. So that was my aim with the jewelry business, with creative, with online selling. It was all that stuff, you know. It was, how do is it going to get me closer to that goal? So that's important. It shouldn't always be about money. In fact, it shouldn't be about money.
I want to throw this in while I remember it, because this kind of fits with how to stick with the goal without it destroying you. Because, you know, some goals destroy you. Like, I'm going to be successful can be a goal that will quickly crush you in so many ways. Noah Kagan, one of my business role models, I really enjoy his stuff. He had talked about something called a proactive checklist, or a proactive spreadsheet, I think. And he said, look, you can't control some things, you can control others. If you want to like continue to be motivated to move forward, you have to track the things you can control. So he's like, for instance, I can't control, like if I say I want to make more money, I can't just control that. But what I can do is say, the more podcast interviews I'm on, the more likely I am to make more sales, for instance. So if I say every week my goal is to contact 5 people about being on a podcast, that can increase my sales, because I know being on podcasts increase sales.
Yeah.
So I guess the point being, to apply it more directly to graphic design, would be like, for me with drawing, I can't control if I draw like crap or if I draw profoundly every day, but I can control that something gets put onto Instagram every day.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of sticking to it, is saying, what can I control?
Yes.
It has nothing, you know what I mean?
I do. It's a
like
good
some
point,
days I'm going to
actually.
suck and I can't control it.
Yeah.
But I can control posting it.
That's a good point. I like that.
And that is hopefully inspiring to the dozens of people who are going to be flocking to your page after this episode.
Truth.
I want them to see that. I want them to see the days where maybe in the description or whatever, you're saying, this sucked today. Like I didn't feel like doing it, but I did it. And the next day you're like, you know what? I'm really glad I did that yesterday, because today's better. And I didn't give up. By the way, one thing I don't think we talked about too much is accountability.
Oh, yeah.
So by the very fact you're putting it out there in the public domain, that's, I think, really motivating to stick with it, because it's not just some private internal thing you can give up with and no one's going to notice.
And now that you've told your family.
Exactly. You've told your family, you've told all the podcast listeners. You now have thousands and thousands of people who've heard you say this on record.
That is the sickeningly scary part.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important. And to give a random example, we've got Carol, who's part of Team Design Cuts. And I think it was last year, she did 300 days of fitness, where she would work out 300 days within the year. So nearly every day.
That's crazy.
And she did it. And she was so consistent. And I truly believe a big part of that is that she told everyone she knew that she was doing it, and she put it on her Instagram. And so people were like regularly asking her, like, oh, what day are you on? Like, how's it going?
Yeah.
and it was started becoming motivating for other people following along and stuff. But that accountability and that public record can certainly be helpful, I think.
Yeah, true.
Mm-hmm. There's a challenge like that I've noticed people get really inspired by. I think it's like a 100-day challenge that people will do for different things. I don't know much about it, but I know that I've seen a lot of people hashtag it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know one guy who he just started doing like little illustrations that he would put on Dribbble of himself working out, different like vector illustrations of him working out with this kind of cool looking cartoon dude.
Yeah.
And he did it for 100 days, day 1, day 2, up to 100. And he ended up getting a job at like somewhere he really wanted to work doing design, partially as a result of doing those drawings.
And I love that, because that would never be a goal to be set. It just happens.
Yeah.
It just happened naturally. Yeah.
I've got a kind of contentious one for you guys. So say that the pair of you were starting something at the same time, a new thing where you're both trying to stick with it. You make an agreement between each other that if you break your word, you have to pay the other one $100.
Oh.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
And you have an agreement where if neither of you break your word and you both stick to it, you get to reward yourselves in some way.
Yeah, there you go.
So it'd be like you go for like a massive like blowout meal or something if
Yeah.
you both stick to it. But otherwise it's like, well, Dustin, you just made $100 if Lisa quit, or vice versa.
I think it's brilliant because a lot of us have a competitive nature, so that would appeal to that. I think you'd stick to it for sure. I know
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah, I know that Lisa seems like she definitely would. She'd be like, there's no way I'm sending Dustin $100 PayPal over my dead body.
Exactly.
You have to pry it out of my cold, dead hands.
That's good.
So any closing thoughts on sticking with anything, whether it's a new skill or trying to build on what you already have?
My favorite was Lisa's point. I felt like was really the core of our whole conversation, was that keep your eye on what the true core goal is of it, and make assessments about whether to stop or not based on, am I still being true to that goal?
Yeah.
As long as you care about that goal.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you were saying, Lisa? Because I felt like that to me was the part that stood out.
It is, because sometimes it means you have to stop the current thing that you're doing to change direction to get to that goal, So, yeah, definitely. Because then, as you said, Tom, it's not always about necessarily sticking it out no matter what, because just now it's not the thing you should be doing, and just now it's not fun anymore. So you got to give yourself leeway to change direction as long as you're clear on your goal, and goals can change too. As long as you know the direction you're going, then that's good.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, Lisa? Or was that kind of your sum up thought?
That idea was pretty awesome. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Yeah, I would kind of reiterate to map your expectations to what you put in, because there's nothing wrong with it. It's kind of refreshing where if you drop the ball, you know what's coming, rather than beating yourself up saying, why is everything going backwards? It's like, well, because that's how the world works.
Yeah. That's so true.
Truth.
But on a happier note, I do think everyone listening, I do think this should be like a listener exercise. If people try and set some kind of goal, big or small, whether you're learning a new skill, whether you're trying to release a new product or your first product, which I know some of the listeners are, or you're trying to land a new client or put out an Instagram post, as I say, big or small or anything in between, it would be cool just to maybe put out a public announcement on your social media. Here's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to stick to this. I'm going to get it done and see what happens.
Exactly. That would be
rather
brilliant.
than it just being in the back of your mind or getting lost on a scrap of paper or a to-do list somewhere. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. We hope that it motivated you to stick with your current creative passions and helped alleviate some of the stresses you may be feeling about your own consistency. As always, you can find full show notes over at honestdesigners.com or find us over on iTunes by searching for The Honest Designers Show. If today's episode helped you at all, then it would mean the world to us if you took just a moment to leave us a quick review over on iTunes. This is literally one of the best ways for your fellow designers to discover the show, and it would mean a lot to us. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week right here on the Honest Designers Show.